Boone Keller's hand closed around Clara Bennett's wrist hard enough to whiten her knuckles. The cookhouse had gone quiet except for the low hiss of the stove. Her inventory ledger lay open on the table between them, pages filled with dates, quantities, and the numbers Boone had spent months assuming no one would ever bother to count. "Give me the book," he said. Clara held on to it. "No." His grip tightened. She didn't scream. Her free hand moved toward the butcher knife beside the cutting board. Then the cookhouse door slammed open. Eli Ward stood in the doorway. For 5 weeks, Clara had known him as the quietest ranch hand at Cedar Ridge, a man who spoke little, worked harder than anyone, and watched everything as if he expected the smallest detail to confess something. There was nothing quiet about his face now. "Take your hand off her." Boone gave a short laugh. "Since when does a hired hand give orders around here?" Eli stepped inside. "Since you put your hands on her, put." Something in his voice made Clara stop reaching for the knife. Something in Boone's expression changed too. Not fear exactly. Recognition. As if, for one dangerous second, Boone had forgotten who Eli Ward really was. 5 weeks earlier, Clara Bennett had arrived at Cedar Ridge with $8, a battered valise, and no intention of staying anywhere longer than necessary. The freight wagon had left her several miles from the ranch because late winter snow had swallowed the smaller road. She walked the rest of the way with her skirt damp to the knees and her mother's kitchen knives wrapped carefully beneath 2 dresses. By the time she reached the bunkhouse, 8 men were finishing coffee around a scarred wooden table. Every one of them looked up. Clara had learned years ago that there were different ways men could look at a woman entering a room where they believed she did not belong. Curiosity, amusement, annoyance, and occasionally something worse. The broad-shouldered man near the stove gave her the most direct look. "Can I help you?" "Depends," Clara said. "Are you the man tired of eating burned beans?" Someone choked on his coffee. A younger cowboy laughed outright. The broad-shouldered man did not. "Amos Bell, foreman." Clara Bennett. "I heard in town you need a cook." That produced another silence. Then a man leaning against the wall said, "We need a cook." Didn't hear, "We needed a woman." His name, she would learn, was Boone Keller. Clara looked at him. "Lucky for you, the food won't know the difference." This time, even Amos almost smiled. Almost. "Our last cook quit 3 days ago," he said. "But I'm not putting a woman in a cookhouse surrounded by ranch hands. I'm not asking you to put me anywhere." She set her valise down. "Give me supper." Amos frowned. "One supper. If they hate it, I'll be gone in the morning. And if they don't, then we discuss wages." That earned her the cookhouse key. The building deserved every warning the town had given her. Ash choked the stove. Grease had hardened along the work table. The stovepipe leaned at an angle Clara did not trust, and the pantry looked as though 3 separate men had been stealing from it without knowing the other 2 existed. Still, there was food. That was enough. She trimmed the usable parts from sprouting potatoes, soaked slices of salt beef, found 4 sound onions beneath a layer of spoiled ones, and turned them into a stew thickened with flour and patience. She mixed biscuits in a skillet because the oven heated unevenly. Molasses and dried apples became a small cobbler. The coffee she could not save. So she burned a fresh batch herself and decided that at least this time the crime was intentional. The ranch hands arrived at sundown expecting another bad meal. They stopped talking after the first bites. Clara had always trusted that silence more than compliments. The young cowboy who had laughed earlier scraped his bowl clean. Mom She looked over. "Jamie Price," he said, suddenly formal. "Could I get some more?" Amos glanced at Clara. She filled Jamie's bowl without smiling. Only then did she notice the man sitting at the far end of the table. Dark hair, weathered coat, early 30s perhaps. He hadn't laughed when she entered the bunkhouse. Hadn't complained either. He ate slowly, not suspiciously, carefully, as if he was evaluating more than taste. When the others left, Clara found him returning with an armload of split wood. "Did Amos send you?" "No, he stacked it beside the stove." "Eli Ward. Clara Bennett." "I know." His eyes went to the stovepipe. "You shouldn't run that damper fully closed. Joint up there leaks." Clara looked at him. She had found the same flaw 2 hours earlier. "You a chimney sweep cowboy?" "That wasn't my question." For the first time, something close to amusement moved across his face. Then it disappeared. He crouched beside the stove and studied the cracked mortar around its base. Clara watched him. Most hired hands noticed whether a kitchen served enough food. Eli Ward noticed repairs. Where? Waste. He looked around that miserable little cookhouse, the way a man might inspect something he had paid for. An hour later, Amos returned. 3 days, he said. Clara nodded. 3 days. That night she made a bed in the cold storeroom behind the pantry. Her valise stayed packed beside her. She unwrapped her mother's knives and laid them carefully on a flour crate. 3 years earlier, she had believed another kitchen was hers. She had spent her savings keeping it alive. Then the owner disappeared with the money, and by sunrise, Clara had learned exactly how quickly a place could stop belonging to you. She would not make that mistake twice. Cedar Ridge was work. Nothing more. Earn enough. Move on. Across the yard, inside the bunkhouse, Eli Ward waited until the other men had settled before speaking quietly to Amos. "Where did Bennett come from?" Amos looked up from his ledger. "Thought you came here to investigate missing supplies and why men keep quitting." Eli said nothing. Amos studied him for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. "Careful, boss." Eli's eyes shifted toward the light still burning in the cookhouse window. Clara believed earning 3 days at Cedar Ridge was the problem she had just solved. She had no idea the only ranch hand who had truly been watching her was the one man who had never needed permission to let her stay. 3 days became a week. A week became 2. By then, no one talked about whether Clara was staying. They talked about breakfast. The greater change began with flour. On her 4th morning, Clara found moisture along the bottom seam of a sack and pulled every supply from the pantry. Once she counted what could be saved, the numbers made no sense. Flour, coffee meat, and molasses were disappearing faster than the ranch could explain. Some loss was carelessness. Some was not. Clara asked Amos for the old supply ledgers. They're not pretty. They don't need to be pretty. She opened the first. They need to be accurate. Within 2 days, flour was off. The dirt floor, meat was dated, deliveries were recorded, and every item moving in or out of the pantry went through Clara. Boone Keller tested the rule first. He pushed through the pantry door after supper. "Getting coffee?" "No." He stopped. "I've worked this ranch 6 years. Clara dried her hands. "And I don't need permission from a cook." "You don't need my permission to be hungry." She pointed toward the shelves. "You need it to empty my pantry." Jamie snorted into his cup. Boone's face hardened. "Things worked fine before you got here." Clara glanced at a split coffee sack near the wall. "No." They worked expensively. The laughter that followed sent Boone out without the coffee. Clara watched him go. She had met men who could forgive inconvenience more easily than embarrassment. After that, small repairs began appearing around the cookhouse. The loose shelf stopped sagging. The pump handle stopped sticking. The worst section of stovepipe was replaced. The chopping table no longer rocked. No one admitted responsibility. Clara found Eli behind the bunkhouse shaving a replacement plank. That table stopped wobbling. He kept working. Good. The shelf, too. Must be lucky. And the pump exceptionally lucky. Clara folded her arms. "You always this bad at accepting thanks?" Eli looked up. You always this determined to give it? Yes. A pause. You're welcome. She smiled before she could stop herself. The men changed too. Jamie began helping with dishes. Hank brought her an old cast-iron skillet and pretended not to care how pleased she was to use it. Men who had once eaten and disappeared began lingering after supper. Clara began looking forward to the routine. That frightened her. So the valise remained packed. Her wages stayed hidden beneath its lining. She could leave Cedar Ridge whenever she pleased. Then there were the mornings with Eli. At first, he simply arrived before everyone else. Soon, Clara began setting out 2 cups before dawn. Neither acknowledged it. One cold morning, he watched her knead dough. Why cooking? That's a strange question from a man waiting for breakfast. I'm serious. Clara pressed her palms into the dough. Hungry people don't lie. Everyone lies. Not with food. A man can say supper was fine because he's polite. But if he scrapes the plate clean, that tells me what I need to know. Eli considered that. So you watch what people do instead of what they say. Usually, that sounds exhausting. So does pretending you don't do exactly the same thing. That stopped him. You watch everyone, Clara said. Occupational habit, cowboying, something like that. There was that wrongness again. Eli knew repair costs. He questioned feed invoices like a bookkeeper. He noticed hinges, roofs, and pumps before Amos did. One evening, he found Clara working over an untouched supper. You haven't eaten. I will. When I'm finished. He pulled out a chair. Sit. 5 minutes. I have bread to cover. I can manage cloth. She stared at him. Kitchen won't collapse because you sit. You sure? His gaze moved across the walls. I've inspected worse buildings. Clara froze. Inspected. His expression changed. When I worked farther south. What exactly did you inspect? Buildings. You answer very few questions. That seems balanced. She laughed despite herself and sat. Later that night, Clara compared the old records with her pantry count. The shortages were too regular for spoilage and too large for appetite. Someone at Cedar Ridge was taking supplies. So she marked flour sacks with tiny charcoal lines, counted coffee tins nightly, and weighed the salt beef. The losses continued. On the 4th morning, Eli found her crouched by the lower shelf. You're setting a trap. I'm counting. You moved the coffee. I cleaned. You marked the flour. Clara looked up. You inspect my flour now. I notice things. I've noticed. He smiled. She laughed. That was how things changed between them. Not with declarations, with coffee. Silence. Small observations. What unsettled Clara was that Eli noticed the work beneath the result. He saw lower waste, better supplies, and the choices that made meals stretch. One morning he found her repairing her apron. You need another one. This one works. It's holding together by 2 stitches. 3. You could buy a new one. I could save the money. For what? Her needle paused. For leaving. Eli looked toward the packed valise in the storeroom. Clara told him about the Frontier House Hotel in Fort Collins. She had run its kitchen, used her own savings when the owner fell behind, and believed his promise that the next railway season would fix everything. Then he vanished with the cash box. Clara lost her wages, her savings, and the room she rented behind the kitchen. I thought I'd built something there, she said. Turns out I'd built it on another man's property. She met Eli's eyes. Never build your life on property another person owns. Something like guilt crossed his face. Sometimes the owner doesn't understand what he can take from people. That sounds personal. It is. For a moment she thought he would tell her who he really was. Instead, he said, I worked with a finance company once. Ranch loans, refinancing, foreclosures. You helped take ranches from people. Yes, no excuse followed. Why stop? Because leaving was the first decent thing I could think to do. Leaving doesn't erase what you did. I know. His acceptance made trusting him easier, which made Clara more uneasy. Boone, meanwhile, had become harder to ignore. He followed her pantry rules when Amos was nearby, and mocked them when he was not. One afternoon, he stared at her inventory notebook. How long you plan on playing bookkeeper, as long as things keep disappearing? You're making trouble where there wasn't any. There was trouble. You just decided to count it. Yes. Boone stepped closer. You'd be happier if you stayed in the kitchen. Clara tapped the notebook. I am in the kitchen. That's why I know what's missing. After that, she locked the pantry every night. Then came the late snow. It blew in from the north so fast that Amos ordered everyone back from the outer range before noon. Most returned. Eli and Jamie did not. By dusk, the wind was driving snow sideways across the yard. Clara kept supper warm. At 8, Hank told her to stop worrying. At 9, Amos sent 2 men toward the south fence line. At 10, Clara added broth to the stew to keep it from scorching. By 11, she was furious. At least that was what she called the feeling. Near midnight, the bunkhouse door opened outside. Voices. Then the cookhouse door swung inward. Jamie stumbled through first, exhausted and grinning weakly. We made it. Clara looked past him. Eli followed, snow crusted across his coat and shoulders. His cheek was cut. You idiot! The words escaped before Clara could stop them. Jamie froze. Eli stared at her. Clara came around the table. You stayed out there in that a calf was trapped near the ravine. A calf. Several. That makes it better. Jamie quietly took his bowl and moved to the far end of the room. Eli removed his gloves. We came back. You could have frozen. But I didn't. That is not a defense. He watched her. Clara suddenly realized how close she was standing, and how angry she had become because for hours she had imagined him not coming back. Eli realized it too. The humor left his face. The cookhouse seemed impossibly quiet. Clara stepped away first. Sit down. Eli obeyed. She poured stew into a bowl. Neither mentioned what had just happened. Neither needed to. The next morning, Clara went into town with Amos's supply wagon. She intended to compare prices and speak to the merchant about the missing coffee. Instead, she found her proof. A trader was loading flour onto a wagon behind the general store. One sack carried a faint black crescent near its upper seam. Clara's charcoal mark. Her stomach tightened. Where did you get that? The trader glanced at her. What, that sack? He looked at it. Bought it. From whom? The man hesitated. Clara stepped closer. It belongs to Cedar Ridge. His expression changed. I paid for it. I didn't say you stole it. Another pause. Then Keller. Clara went cold. Boone Keller. Yeah. Sold me flour twice. Coffee. Once. Said ranch had excess. Clara took out her notebook. When the trader gave her the dates, they matched. Every one. By the time Clara returned to Cedar Ridge, she had enough evidence to end the mystery. She found Amos near the barn. I need to speak with you tomorrow morning. His eyes went to the notebook in her hand. You found something, yes. Across the yard, Boone was unloading tack from a wagon. He looked toward them. Then toward the trader, disappearing down the road behind Clara. His face went still. Clara saw the moment he understood. She knew. And now Boone knew she knew. Clara waited until breakfast was over before laying the evidence on Amos's desk. Dates, missing quantities, the trader's statement, the marked flour sack. Amos read everything twice. How long? At least 4 months from what I can prove. And before that, the old records aren't good enough. His jaw tightened. You're sure about Keller? The trader named him. Every date matches. Amos looked at the ledger again. We ought to wait for Eli. Clara's eyes narrowed. Wait for Eli to do what Amos froze. Why does a ranch hand need to be involved before you make a decision he doesn't? That isn't what you just said. You'll get an answer soon. That answer irritated her more than silence. Don't confront Boone, Amos added. I wasn't planning to. But by noon, Boone was already talking loudly to the other men. This ranch ran fine before someone decided every spoonful of flour needed a signature. Clara heard him from the cookhouse window. Now Amos dances around her ledger. And Ward's got reasons of his own to keep her happy. Clara stepped outside. If you have something to say about my work, say it where I can hear you. Boone smiled. You've got Ward here before sunrise, fixing shelves, carrying wood, making sure Amos hears whatever you say. You think my work matters because a man likes me. I think things got convenient for you real fast. Jamie stepped forward. That's enough. Clara lifted a hand. No. She kept her eyes on Boone. You've been here 6 years. You had 6 years to notice this ranch was losing supplies. His smile vanished. You didn't. She pointed toward the cookhouse. I did. Inside her hands were steady when she picked up the knife again. Her thoughts were not. Boone's accusation touched an older fear. The Fort Collins owner had praised Clara too, made approval sound like security, then vanished with her money. When Eli entered near sunset, she was waiting. Why does Amos wait for your... Silence. Don't tell me I imagined it. You didn't. I've watched you inspect buildings, question invoices, talk to Amos like he reports to you. Eli said nothing. You're not just a ranch hand. No. Then what are you? Before he could answer, shouting erupted outside. A riderless horse crossed the yard, and Amos appeared in the doorway. Ward. Now. Eli looked at Clara. I'll explain. When? As soon as I'm back. That sounds familiar. Then he was gone. The emergency took most of the evening. By the time the men returned, Clara was cleaning alone and wondering how many conversations with Eli had happened while he knew something she did not. Near 10, the cookhouse door opened. You're late, she said without turning. No answer. Boone stood inside. The kitchen's closed. I'm not here to eat. He shut the door. His eyes went to the ledger. You showed Amos that book? Yes. You really think those numbers mean anything? They mean you sold Cedar Ridge property that wasn't yours. Boone came closer. You show up 5 weeks ago and think you understand this place. I understand theft. He lunged for the ledger. Clara held on. Give me the book. No. His hand closed around her wrist. Pain shot up her arm. The butcher knife waited beside the cutting board. Then the door slammed open. Eli stood there. Take your hand off her. Boone laughed. Since when does a hired hand give orders around here? Since you put your hands on her. Boone squeezed once more. Eli's voice dropped. Let her go. Boone released her. Eli moved between them. What are you going to do? Ward Boone asked. Fire me a beat, if it comes to that. Clara saw Amos's unfinished sentence again. We ought to wait for Eli. Boone stepped forward. Eli did too. Clara caught Eli's arm. No. Then she faced Boone herself and lifted the ledger. You stole from this ranch, and you put your hands on me. His smile faded. Those are two separate choices. Her wrist throbbed. You'll answer for both. Amos arrived with Hank and 2 other hands. Boone denied everything, blamed the trader, then claimed the supplies had been payment owed to him. Each story contradicted the last. Amos put him under guard until morning. The theft would be reported. The assault would be Clara's decision to pursue. But Boone's removal split the ranch. Two men defended him. Jamie argued back. Hank ordered everyone quiet. Clara listened from the cookhouse doorway. Before she came, Cedar Ridge had been imperfect but stable. Now Boone was under guard, the men were divided, and the quiet cowboy she trusted was clearly someone else. Maybe this was the moment to leave, before belonging cost too much again. At dawn, wagon wheels sounded on the road. Not a supply wagon. Something better built. Polished. Expensive. The ranch hands gathered outside. A middle-aged man in a dark coat stepped down. Amos walked toward him. The stranger barely acknowledged the others. Clara came out of the cookhouse, wiping flour from her hands. Jamie whispered, "Think that's the owner?" "No," Hank said. The stranger adjusted his gloves. "Samuel Pike," Amos said quietly. Clara recognized the name from invoices. Business manager. The man's eyes moved across the yard, then stopped on Eli. He walked straight to him. Clara watched. Pike removed his hat. "Mr. Wardle." No one spoke. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Eli did not correct him, did not laugh, did not pretend. He simply looked at Clara. And in that instant, every unanswered question had the same answer. Eli Ward had never been a hired hand. He was Elias Wardell, the owner of Cedar Ridge Ranch. For several seconds, Clara heard nothing. Not the horses shifting near the rail. Not Jamie whispering under his breath. Not the wind moving dust across the yard. Only the name. Wardell. Mr. Wardell. Eli stood 10 yards away, still wearing the same work coat he had worn while repairing her shelves, carrying firewood, and drinking coffee in her kitchen before dawn. But suddenly, every small detail rearranged itself. The invoices he understood. The buildings he inspected. The way Amos deferred to him. The questions. The watching. Clara felt foolish for every time she had nearly guessed the truth, and then let him change the subject. Samuel Pike looked around at the gathered ranch hands. "I assume," he said carefully, "this was not how you intended to make the announcement." Eli's eyes never left Clara. "No." A few men started speaking at once. "You own this place, Ward," since when Amos stepped forward. Enough. That quieted them. Barely. Eli took off his hat. "My name is Elias Wardle." The words sounded strange in the open yard. "I own Cedar Ridge." Jamie stared at him. "You've been sleeping in the bunkhouse?" "Yes." "Eating with us?" "Yes." Hank folded his arms. "Working fence?" "Yes." Someone muttered a curse. Clara said nothing. Eli continued. "I came here because Cedar Ridge had problems that were not showing up in the reports I received." He looked toward Amos. Men quitting. Supplies disappearing. Costs rising. New hands leaving before they finished a month. His gaze moved across the crew. I wanted to see what this ranch looked like when no one thought the owner was watching. That landed badly. Several men shifted. One of Boone's friends laughed without humor. So that's what this was. Spying Eli did not flinch. Yes. The direct answer surprised everyone. I could call it observation, investigation, management. Any of those words would be easier. He paused. But yes. I was watching. Amos added, "I knew." That earned him several angry looks. Clara barely heard the rest. Her attention remained fixed on Eli. Every time he had praised her work, he had not been another hired hand recognizing skill. He had been the man who could decide whether she stayed. Every time she complained about Cedar Ridge, she had been complaining to its owner. Every morning she had trusted him a little more. He had allowed her to trust a version of him that did not exist. She turned away. Clara. She kept walking. Clara. She entered the cookhouse. Eli followed. The door had barely shut before she faced him. Every time I complained about this ranch, I was complaining to the man who owned it. Yes. Every time I told you Amos was impossible, yes. Every time I said this kitchen had been neglected, yes. His honesty made her angrier. And every time you told me I was doing good work, I meant it. That's not the point. Eli stopped. Clara laughed once sharply. Do you know what the point is? I think I do. No, you don't. She moved behind the table because she needed something solid between them. You let me believe we were the same. His brow tightened. I never said you didn't have to. She pointed toward the bunkhouse. You slept there. You worked beside them. You let everyone call you Ward. You let me think you were another man earning wages from someone who could take the job away whenever he pleased. Eli was quiet. And all that time, Clara continued, you were that someone. He looked down. That is true. The answer cut deeper than an excuse would have. Clara turned toward the stove. The iron range blurred for a moment. Fort Collins came back with humiliating clarity. A hotel owner promising wages, promising stability, telling Clara how valuable she was. A man with money deciding what her work was worth, until the moment he decided it was worth nothing. She had sworn she would never put herself in that position again, and she had walked straight into it. Did Amos hire me because of you? No. Did you tell him to keep me? No. Did you tell him to extend the trial? No. Clara faced him. Did you ever make one decision about my employment because you liked me? Eli took a slow breath. No. She studied him. Think before you answer. I am. His voice stayed steady. I noticed you because of the work. That is not what I asked. No. I did not keep you here because I wanted you. The word hung between them. Wanted. Clara's face heated despite herself. Eli continued before she could speak. You were already proving your value before I had any right to feel anything personal about you. Easy thing for an owner to say. Yes. Clara blinked. He stepped toward the table but did not come closer than that. So don't take my word for it. He placed a stack of papers beside her ledger. What is that, numbers? Clara almost laughed. You think numbers fix this? No. Then why bring them? Because numbers don't care whether I'm attracted to you. That silenced her. Eli opened the first page. Food waste is down. Another page. Supply spending is down. Another. Meal loss from spoilage is down. He tapped the inventory ledger. You found theft that had been hidden for months. Then he looked around the cookhouse. The men stay here after meals now. Clara said nothing. They're eating better. They're wasting less. Jamie stopped talking about leaving. Hank told Amos morale has improved. Eli's gaze returned to her. You changed this ranch before you knew who I was. Clara folded her arms. And that proves what? That your place here has nothing to do with my feelings. He paused, then said quietly, You didn't earn your place because I wanted you. Clara held his eyes. I wanted you because I watched you earn it. The room went completely still. That sentence should not have mattered. It did. Clara hated that it did. She looked away first. Outside, voices were rising again. Eli straightened. I need to speak to the crew. Then go. He hesitated. Clara, what I should have told you sooner. Yes, I thought, if I revealed myself before I understood what was happening here, people would change their behavior. That explains why you lied to them. She looked directly at him. It doesn't explain why you kept lying to me after I trusted you. Ely absorbed that without argument. No, he said. It doesn't. Then he left. The ranch meeting happened outside the bunkhouse. Clara stayed near the cookhouse door, close enough to hear, far enough not to be part of it. Ely stood before the men without Amos beside him this time. No disguise, no performance. If you're angry, you have reason. Boone's closest friend spoke first. You watched us like thieves. I watched because something was wrong. And found Boone. Yes. That means the rest of us were guilty too. Then why not just ask? Eli's face tightened. Because reports had been telling me Cedar Ridge was fine for a year. He looked around. It wasn't. No one answered. I should have been here sooner. That changed the tone. Not entirely, but enough. Eli continued. I let problems become normal because I believed what reached my desk instead of what was happening on the ground. His gaze swept the ranch. Boone did what he did because he thought no one with authority was paying attention. A long silence followed. That failure starts with me. Clara watched several men glance at one another. The confession mattered more than she expected. Eli did not make himself the hero. He did not pretend his deception had been noble, simply because it had found the truth. He owned the damage. Then he turned toward Clara. Her stomach tightened. Clara Bennett will remain at Cedar Ridge if she chooses. Several heads turned. She did not move. Eli continued. She has been offered the position of head cook and provision manager. Now everyone looked at her. Clara hated being watched. Eli seemed to notice. He kept speaking quickly. The position includes authority over pantry access supply orders, kitchen purchases, and hiring an assistant during cattle drive season. Jamie grinned. Hank looked pleased. Eli added, her wages will increase accordingly. Clara crossed her arms. Boone's friend muttered, because she found the theft. Eli looked at him. Because she is already doing the job. That ended the question. Afterward, Clara found Eli alone near the corral. You could have warned me before announcing that. I should have. You're learning. Slowly. She nearly smiled. Nearly. Then she remembered why she was there. What if I say no? Eli answered immediately. Then you leave with every dollar you've earned. And no trouble. No trouble. No bad word sent to another ranch. No. No suddenly discovering I owe Cedar Ridge for lodging or supplies. His expression sharpened with pain. Never. Clara nodded. That mattered, more than she wanted him to know. The job is yours, he said. If you want it. And if I don't, I'll still be grateful you came. She looked at him. No persuasion. No charm. No reminder that he had protected her from Boone. He gave her the thing she had wanted most since Fort Collins. A choice that belonged entirely to her. I'll answer in the morning, she said. Eli nodded. All right. He did not follow her. That night, Clara stood alone in the cookhouse. The place looked different now. Not because anything had changed that day. Because she could finally see what had changed since she arrived. The shelves were arranged her way. The pantry system was hers. The repaired table bore fresh knife marks from weeks of work. A row of labeled jars sat above the stove. Her inventory ledger rested near the door. Eli had built one shelf. Hank had brought the skillet. Jamie washed dishes. Amos had given her 3 days. But Clara had done the rest. She had been thinking of Cedar Ridge as Elias Wardell's ranch. His land, his buildings, his kitchen. That was true legally, but it was not the whole truth. The life inside the cookhouse had not existed before she came. She had made it, for the first time since Fort Collins. Clara understood that building something on another person's land did not automatically make the building of it meaningless. The question was whether she had a voice in what happened next. Tomorrow she would find out. Eli knew Clara was gone before he reached the cookhouse. The storeroom stood open. Her blanket was folded. The battered valise was missing. For one terrible moment he simply stared. Then something clattered in the kitchen. Clara stood beside the work table with the valise open, taking things out. Not putting them in. Her mother's knives lay beside it. "You look disappointed," she said. "I thought you left." "I'm moving. If I'm staying through summer, I'm not sleeping beside flour sacks." For the first time since Pike arrived, Eli laughed. "So you're staying?" "Staying, I haven't agreed to your terms." "What terms?" "Exactly." She closed the valise. "You offered higher wages. You never named the number." "Name it. 20% more than the last cook." "Done." "That was too fast. You were going to ask for more. I am now." 25. "Done." Clara narrowed her eyes. "You're terrible at bargaining." "I'm not bargaining. That's worse." She pulled a folded page from her apron. "You wrote it down. I manage supplies. I believe in records." Clara had made a list. Of course she had. She pulled a folded page from her apron pocket. Eli looked at it. "You wrote it down. I manage supplies. I believe in records." He gestured for her to continue. "Full authority over pantry inventory. You have it. I choose suppliers when prices and quality justify changing them." "Yes." "I get an assistant during cattle drive season." "Yes." "Not a cowboy you decide is temporarily available. Someone hired for kitchen work." "Agreed. The oven needs rebuilding before next winter." "I know. The south patch beside the cookhouse should become a kitchen garden." Eli glanced toward the window. "That soil is poor." "Then improve it." He smiled. "Anything else?" "My own room." "Amos is already clearing the small room beside the office." Clara lowered the page. "You assumed I'd stay?" "No." "Then why clear it, I hoped?" That answer landed too softly for her liking. She looked back at the paper. "One more." Eli waited. "No secrets that directly affect my work." His expression changed immediately. "Agreed. I mean it." "So do I." Clara folded the page. "Good. So that settles the job," he said. "The job." He caught the distinction. "And none of it has anything to do with whatever this is between you and me." "No." "If I disagree with you about ranch business, it stays business." "Yes. If I tell you no about something personal, it does not affect my work." "It won't." Clara watched him carefully. "And you never decide what I want because you own the land I'm standing on." Eli nodded. "That should have been obvious from the start." "It should have." A pause. Then Clara asked, "So what is this, for once?" Elias Wardell looked uncertain. "I don't know. That inspiring is it." He smiled. "Something I'd like permission to find out." He did not step closer, did not fill the silence for her. Finally, Clara said, "All right. All right. You have permission to find out." That sounds dangerously close to paperwork. Get used to it. Spring came slowly to Cedar Ridge. By May, the ranch barely resembled the place Clara had entered with a packed valise and $8. The oven held heat. Shelves lined the pantry. Shipments were recorded. A kitchen garden filled the south patch, and Clara's assistant, Maggie Sloan, enforced pantry rules with even less patience than Clara did. New hands learned quickly. So did the old ones. Eli changed ranch policy after his investigation. Inventory was tracked, pay records were reviewed, and complaints could reach Amos or Pike without disappearing into silence. The clearest proof came one evening when a new hand watched Clara carrying a platter. "Never thought I'd see a ranch letting a woman run its provisions." Before Clara could answer, Hank set down his fork. "She runs them, because she's better at it than anyone we had before." Jamie added, and because we like eating. Another cowboy said, "You got a problem with her? Go hungry somewhere else." The newcomer looked around and found no one laughing with him. Clara continued serving. Eli stood near the door. He said nothing. Neither did Amos. They did not need to. Months earlier, Clara's place at Cedar Ridge depended on proving herself every day. Now her authority had become ordinary, permanent enough to be assumed. One Sunday afternoon, Clara went into her room looking for a shawl. She bent beside the bed. Her valise was underneath it. Dust covered the top. She pulled it out and stared. For years, the valise had been ready. Clothes folded. Knives wrapped. Money hidden. Everything arranged so she could leave within minutes if a place turned against her. Now it was nearly empty. Her dresses hung on hooks. Her books sat on a shelf Eli had not built. Clara had built that one herself. Her mother's knives hung above the work table in the cookhouse. She had ordered supplies through autumn. Planted vegetables she would not harvest for months. Bought ceramic jars too heavy to pack into one wagon. She had even ordered curtains. Curtains. A woman preparing to flee did not buy curtains. Clara sat on the edge of the bed. She had done the thing she had promised never to do again. She had built a future on land she did not own. But it did not feel like Fort Collins. Because this time no one had promised her that belonging would be given to her. She had negotiated for it, worked for it, helped shape the rules protecting it. And if Elias Wardell disappeared tomorrow, Clara Bennett would still know exactly what she had built and exactly what it was worth. That evening, after supper, she found Eli outside the cookhouse. He sat on the steps with 2 cups of coffee. "You planned that he held one out." "I took a risk." Clara sat beside him. The ranch was quiet. Light spilled through the cookhouse windows. Inside, Jamie and Maggie were arguing about who had washed the last pot. Neither seemed angry. Eli looked toward the pasture. "You know I was supposed to be watching the ranch." Clara sipped her coffee. "You were. That was the entire reason I came here. So I've heard." Then you walked in. She turned toward him, and he met her eyes. "I started watching the cook." Clara smiled. "For professional reasons at first. How long did that last?" Eli pretended to consider. "Not very." She laughed quietly. He watched her. There was no urgency in him now. No assumption. Months had passed since she gave him permission to discover what existed between them. They had ridden into town together twice. Shared more morning coffee than either could count. Argued over the cost of replacing a stove. Disagreed about the garden fence. Once spent an entire evening discussing nothing more romantic than whether Hank was secretly feeding bacon to the ranch dogs. Eli had never pushed. Never used the ranch to corner into anything. For the first time, Clara understood that she was not waiting for him to decide what came next. The choice was hers. So she set down her cup. Eli glanced at her. What Clara leaned toward him, then kissed him. He froze for half a heartbeat. After that, his hand came lightly to her cheek. When she pulled back, Eli looked almost stunned. Clara picked up her coffee again. There you wanted to find out." A slow smile spread across his face. "I may need additional investigation." "Careful, boss." He laughed. The word no longer frightened her. Behind them, the cookhouse glowed against the dark. A pot of stew rested on the stove for the night crew. Fresh bread cooled near the window. Outside, the kitchen garden had begun climbing its supports. Clara stood and looked across the small patch of green. A few months earlier, Every new place had made her ask the same question. How long until I have to leave? Now she found herself studying the empty ground beyond the onions. She wondered whether tomatoes would survive there. Maybe peas near the fence. Perhaps another row of herbs. She had come to Cedar Ridge looking for a place to cook. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped preparing to leave and started building reasons to stay.